that time of year again, a time for chilly, crisp air and the joy and merriment of Christmas is just around the corner. And so, ladies, gentlemen, and all variations thereupon, it's time for some hot chocolate and some Christmas decorations. First though, the hot chocolate. Edward! Part 1. Paper baubles. Right, so for our first project, all we're going to need is some pieces of coloured card, a pen or pencil, and a hot glue gun. And to be fair, you don't actually need a hot glue gun. You can get away with pretty much any adhesive, as long as you can use it to stick on both sides. So our first step here is to decide on the size of the ornament that we want. So I've got a grid on my cutting mat, so I can just eyeball it, but you might want to use a ruler, and I'm just going to go for like 5 centimeters by 5 centimeters. Actually, let's go 5 centimeters by 3 centimeters. 5 centimeters by 3.5 centimeters will do me. So what I'm going to do is fold in 3.5 centimeters. Actually closer to 4 centimeters, but you know. And then we'll do another fold 5 centimeters up. Okay, so this square down here is going to be where we're going to put the design for the bauble. The important thing to remember with this is you want a symmetrical design. So you may want to do something just circular, or something that waves in or out, something like a Christmas tree or a snowflake or something, as long as it's something that's going to be the same on both sides. And what I'm going to go for is sort of a just general dual shape. I'm just going to draw a line down the middle. So this would be mirrored on the other side. I'm going to draw it on, but you don't need to draw it on. You can just fold it in half again and cut. Just do take just this square, and then we have a piece of card with our design on. I'm going to fold in half along the centre and cut out half of that template, which is why you only need to draw half on, and why I wasn't too fussed about making it perfectly symmetrical. And there we go. So that's going to be the design of the bauble. It's going to be very thin and very small and very difficult to glue, but that's what I want. So now I'm going to fold up the rest of this card on the same dimensions. So 3.5 by 5 pattern. Strip at the end is extra, and fold it, and then fold the same the other way. And cut off the excess. And the reason I'm saying to do it this way is that when you're doing something with this many repetitions, it's important to find efficiencies where you can. So there we have a series of strips of card, and we're going to leave these 4 sections attached because it's going to make it quicker later on. We're going to fold these back up again, and then once it's all folded together, we're going to fold it directly in half. So there we have what's essentially 8 individual rectangles of card. And we're going to take our template that we cut out earlier, place it along one of the edges. You may want to tape it into place, but if you're going to do that, use a tape that's very mild. And actually, I'm going to colour this in with a black pen so it stands out a bit more. Okay, crudely coloured in black pen with black pen, but I'm going to place that on the one edge so you can see. We've got the template placed against the card, and we're going to just cut along the outside of that template, following it as closely as we can so we can get 8 different duplicates of that, and there is enough space on the opposite side so we can do it again and get 16 out of this one fold of paper. And if you're struggling to cut through that much paper, then you might want either sharper scissors or just do less folds. And unfolding that, we can see we've got the 8 designs, and all of these need to be cut down that centre fold So we have 16 identical pieces of paper that all can stack together as so. And we're going to do that for as many times as we want, preferably one for each of those. And this is where we find out just how accurately we managed to adhere to that template, because now we've got to stack them together. And by the way, fans of computer science might be very pleased with the numbers I chose there. Sets of 8, almost like in bits and bytes. So once again, finding efficiencies where we can, what we're going to do is basically to put these together in sets of 2. So we've got 2 there, and we're going to glue these together. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to put 3 dabs of glue, 1 at the bottom, 1 at the tip, and 1 halfway down. So now we have a decent pile of these little bauble designs that are sandwiched together, too thick, with 3 glue dots down the centre of them. And what we're going to do now, in order to finish the design, is going to put the dots of glue in between where we put the other 2. So before we put it at the very top, the very bottom, and in the middle. This time we're going to do 1 there and 1 there, so halfway in between where we put glue dots before, and then stick them together, and then just keep piling one on top of the other in order to create a big sort of fan of them. So, dots, dots, sandwich, dots, dots, sandwich. And try not to let the glue seep out of the sides too much, because we don't want to glue all of the different pieces together. And once you've glued all of those together, then when you put it around, you get this concertina pattern where you've got some open at the bottom, some open at the top, and it gets like a kind of honeycomb shape. So all that's left to do now is 2 options. Either you can put some sort of latch on there by making cuts into the card that interlock, so you can lock it in, unlock it, and open it out again and store it relatively flat. Or take a bit of string or twine or elastic or something, place that in the centre of a blob of hot glue, place another blob between those 2 folds, and there we have it, a charming little Christmas decoration. Now, making one this small is incredibly difficult and doesn't quite look as good. You can make larger ones which are more impressive and easier to make. The reason I made one this small is because I want to use it in the next build. Speaking of which, part 2. Desktop tree. Damn, I should have made that part 3, it would have rhymed. And for the next build, I'm going to be using primarily these wooden dowels. Now these are relatively cheap, and I happen to have a low lying around because I was going to do quite a lot of woodworking projects this year, but the price of wood has gone through the roof, so I haven't been doing that much. So I've got all these wooden dowels just lying around, and I'm going to make use of them. If you don't have these wooden dowels, you can use things like rolled up pieces of paper, any old sticks. You don't have to have perfectly plain ones, just get some that have fallen off of trees. And the plan with these is to stack them up on top of each other so that they stick out at different angles like branches. And we're going to glue them together onto other sticks and build them up, making them progressively narrower and narrower until we get a little desktop Christmas tree. However, at the moment they're all the same size, so we're going to need to start cutting some of them down. Now you can do this just by eye, or you can do it with a little bit of maths. I personally prefer to do the halfway method, where you've got a grid on my cutting mat, or you can just use a ruler or some graph paper, and then just place your sticks down in order to create the shape of the Christmas tree that you want, which is primarily going to be a triangle, and then you can see at each stage how wide they're going to be. Each level is going to have 4 sticks to it, which comes to about 2 centimeters high, and then we're going to have a 1 centimeter gap between them. So now, using this a triangle, I can work out how big each stick would need to be cut to. Now, if I don't want it at that perfectly triangular shape, I can just boop, 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 make it wider. The only reason that I put them to that point was for demonstration. This line down here is the only one that has to be the length of the stick, because you can't get a longer stick, so that's going to be the maximum length of your stick. And you go as high as you need to. If you need to do any higher than that, once you get to the top and you're putting some more on, you either need to extend it with another bit of stick, or you need to, just estimate and draw on like that. So, in order to get these to the right length, what you're going to do, once you've measured them up and you know how wide you want each one to be, then you're going to line them up on your cutting mat or next to your ruler, and use the centimetre squares to work out exactly how wide you want your cuts to be. For the first set that you do, I recommend making all the cuts the same distance as you want the branches to be from each other. So I want a 1 centimetre gap between each set of branches, so I'm doing a 1 centimetre cut on either side of these sticks, so that I can then use the off cuttings to create the separators. And because of how flimsy all of these are, what I'm going to do in order to make the cuts quicker and to make them less likely to snap as I'm cutting through, I'm going to tie them together with an elastic band, just continually wrapping round, and then lightly clamp it in the vise. Now these are soft wood, so they're going to indent if I clamp too hard, so I'm just going to do a light clamp, pushing the sticks in as far as they'll go before it hits the elastic band, and give it a slight tighten, just a little bit. Just enough pressure to keep it in place. And all of the marks that I've made on the sticks are all lined up in the same area. And then hacksaw. And keep in mind also that you're going to need less sticks than you think you will, because the offcuts from some of the sticks can be used as the branches for higher sticks. Even though these ones were the ones I was intending to cut, these off-cuttings can be used on the branch just slightly higher up, so you only really need half the number of sticks you think you will. Now there is a slight problem in what we're doing here, in that the sticks that we're using, the dowels, are very thin and won't stand up on their own. So we're going to need a wider base. Now you can get around this by simply putting a bunch of sticks together, making a thicker log in the centre, and that will stand up on its own once you've glued it all in. And as I did in this video where I made a personalised wax seal, you can use wood glue to lash a bunch of these together and turn them into basically one solid piece of wood, and that works really well and holds up really well. What I'm going to do here, however, is make a festive base. Now I have this silvery card that I use to make these decorations out of, and this is one of the off-cuttings from making that. What I'm going to do is place a blob of hot glue in the middle of that, and then when I place the sticks on top and glue them in, the width of that base should hold the whole tree together. If it doesn't, then I need to put some weight around the outside, and you can do that by simply pushing some pins down to hold it in place, or making some tiny little presents or something put around the bottom of the tree, and it will hold it up.
Part 3, the Christmas diorama.
Now this next build is the most complicated, but still very easy. And for the first step, what we'll need is some sort of cardboard. Now, not all cardboard is the same. Corrugated cardboard, the sort that you get in Amazon boxes, it can get a texture to it even after you've painted it, so it's not ideal for this purpose. Pizza boxes, cereal boxes, things like that, they're only 1 ply thick and they tend to be more like paper. So once you've painted them, they tend to still look like one thin sheet. You can use things like plywood for this, but I'm doing it out of recycled materials as best I can. Grab yourself a pizza box, open it up and draw on this area the design that you want. For my purposes, what I'm going to draw on is a forest scene with the reindeer in the middle. Forest scene, the easy part, one big square backdrop. Don't need to draw that, and just cut that out of a piece of card. But for the forest itself, several trees, and we only need to do the outline of them, not the detail in the middle. So, and once you've cut all them out, we should have several layers of pieces. We'll have a big white backdrop part, a floor part, and this is made out of just any old piece of cardboard, but it was white on top, so that'll do as a floor, which is snowy. We have some background pieces, which are the forest trees and a few little bushes. And finally, we have a reindeer to sit at the front. Top tip for reindeer, if you want them to look more cute than fierce, then make sure their antlers are more rounded. Okay, and now that we've cut all them out, the next step is to paint them up. And we want them painted in different colours for different layers. What colour you choose doesn't really matter. The point is that we're going to have different colours so that they stand in contrast to each other. I might only do 2 different colours, so we'll have a background colour and then a foreground colour, but I'm not certain yet. I'll see how the mood takes me as I'm painting. One thing to note is that we are going to light up behind the back of these, and these are very thin and won't stand up on their own. Once we glue them in place, they're going to stand up a little bit more, but they still might sag and fall a little bit. So be sure to keep some of the scrap pieces of cardboard so that we can stick onto the back and support it, but keep in mind when you're cutting these out and making the shapes, exactly where your supports are going to be relative to where you want the lighting to be. So what you don't want is for a light to be on this small side and then the support to be on this wide side, and then have the middle of the diorama sort of here, and then have a big shadow cast over the rest of your diorama because you've got the support there. So what you want is for your supports to be on the outside of the design, so this little reindeer would be in the middle, the support would be under the big tree at the end, and then we'd have a light somewhere in between the two. So we've got to plan out that as we're cutting as to where you want your supports to be relative to the lights. Right, so that's been painted, and while we're waiting for that to dry, we're going to move on to the ground and the electronics. Now you can use any old lights for this build. What I have here is my recycled LED lights. And you may remember these from the Hex Shelf build. The link is up there if you want to know how to wire them properly. But if you just get any old lights, tea lights, anything, we just need to make sure they're strategically placed. So we're going to have this as the main backdrop, these parts as sort of design on the inside to make it look like a forest scene, and then the centerpiece is going to be the reindeer. So we're going to have to think about this in layers. So we're going to need lights along the back in order to light up the backdrop. We want lights in front of the trees but behind bushes, so we're going to need another 2 either side because we want an open space in the middle for the reindeer, and we want the reindeer lit up as well, probably just with ambient light because it's going to be hard to hide the light behind, especially with all the wires. So Okay, so what I've done is I've just hot glued these in place. Hot glued because the stickiness of these lights has long since gone. So I have these back two lighting up the backdrop. These front two will be lighting up the trees and hidden behind bushes, and in the middle here we'll have the reindeer, and I'm going to try my best to hide that wire. If I can't, then I might have to use cotton wool or something to make it look a bit snowy and hide it.